Order. Catherine Atkinson to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered city and town centre regeneration. And it's a pleasure to see you in the chair, Mr Vickers. In less than 1 month, our city and town centres should be at their best. On Remembrance Sunday, they will be full. We gather at the war memorials that are rightly the focal point of our public spaces. And as we look around and hear the last posts and the reveille, we will feel an intense pride in the people we're with, our history, our home. And we want our city and town centres to instil in us that same sense of pride. But in too many of them, the backdrop will include empty shops and units. Remembrance Sunday is a time when our town and city centres will be full of people. But for too many, the footfall most days is far lower than needed to support our local businesses and venues. In Derby, we're proud of our city, of what we make, of our history, of our creativity, and we want our city centre to reflect that. Chair, we must have public spaces in every town and city that people can feel proud of and safe in and want to come to. Not just on Remembrance Sunday, but the following day and every day. And can I say I am hugely optimistic about creating centres that are fit for the future. And today it is wonderful that we have many members here demonstrating that the political will is there. It's fantastic to be able to open today's debate on city and town centres because without a great centre, there can be no great city or town. It can often set the character and personality of the rest of the town or city. 7 in 10 of us judge the vitality of an area as a whole based on the high street alone. An attractive centre means that we are more likely to visit and spend time, invest or start a business, work, study, or permanently move to the area. All essential to that elusive agglomeration effect that drives economic growth, attracting talented people and providing a space for them to share knowledge. And that is what we're doing with major regeneration schemes in Derby. I pledge my support for Becketwell, a 3,500 capacity performance venue, and a transformed market hall for stall holders to open next year. And last week, work started on the redevelopment of the Frigates Goodyard after 50 years of the building lying vacant. And the University of Derby is building a new business school, and with Derby this year's #1 city for new graduates, with an average graduate salary of over £40,000, which is the second highest outside of London, according to recruiting experts Talos 360. So for these reasons, Derby is attracting a lot of inward investment, and I pay tribute to the leadership of the council leader Nadine Peatfield, and before that my honourable friend for Derby South in driving regeneration forward. I also thank the Minister for listening to the case we made for the restoration of the historic Guildhall Theatre and the redevelopment of Derby Theatre and the £20 million that we now have to take that forward. And it's exciting to be part of transforming the city centre with Marketing Derby and the Business Investment District, our city centre businesses pulling together. The Centre for Cities reminds us that successful city centres are the most productive parts of the UK economy and of the role of national government in accelerating planning reforms, facilitating substantial public investment to kickstart projects and focusing regeneration schemes on our centres. But no matter what new buildings and infrastructure we're able to build locally, it's the foundations that the government will lay that I want to turn to. The flagship 5-point plan to rejuvenate high streets is fundamental, but as broad as this is, the issues go wider into culture, transport, devolution, housing, small business support and beyond. In essence, Chair, there needs to be a whole government approach, and that is what I want to turn to.
May I intervene?
Yes.
Ms MacDonald.
Would the Speaker give us an opinion on the business improvement district and whether she thinks that this is a valuable thing for market towns and small cities across Britain to rejuvenate their economy.
Catherine Atkinson.
The bids that we have seen in Derby have been really useful, and certainly the Partnership for Better Business, who support business improvement districts, have made suggestions in relation to empty shops, which is something that I want to come on to as well. But firstly, I would like to talk about tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. To take back our streets, as the Home Secretary says, to take back our town and city centres. When high streets feel unsafe, consumers choose other shopping options. That is how the Association of Convenience Stores puts it. So we need the patrols, the neighbourhood policing and the respect orders to ban persistent offenders from town centres. And the removal of the previous government's £200 prosecution threshold and a new specific offence for assaults on shop workers, I'd like to pay tribute to the work of USDOR, the Shop Workers Union and the Co-op on their campaigns on this. There's also hope from technology, with companies like Derby's Baron McCann, which is using artificial intelligence and biometrics analysis to support retailers to detect and prevent theft. Secondly, it's support for businesses. The reforming business rates to level the playing field between the high street and online giants, tackling late payments, better incentivising investment and supporting entrepreneurship. We have amazing businesses like Mr Shaw's on Sadlergate in the Cathedral Quarter, and we want to see them thrive. Thirdly, support for arts and culture, because while Derby's redevelopment plans are in motion, we need to sustain the amazing offer that we already have, like our museums, including the Museum of Making, housed in the UNESCO-inscribed Derby Silk Mill, the cultural hub of the Quad, Art Corps and many others. It is so important for our city, the work that they do, but they do need the support so that they are ready to take full advantage of the increased footfall we will see. Fourthly, better public transport links, particularly from new housing developments in our centres to our centres, because Cycling UK have great examples of where cycling lanes and pedestrian-friendly streets have revitalised parts of city centres. And finally, an agile approach to the city centre space to support a mix of retail, public services, independent small businesses, entertainment, housing, and more green and family-friendly spaces. And I hope that we can hear from honourable members many other examples of the policies that are mission critical to local city and town centres.
Honourable Lady give way.
Please.
The Honourable Lady is making some excellent points on regeneration and for towns and cities. The high streets in my constituency of Lee, Atherton, Goulburn and Tilsley are huge assets to our local community. However, as the Honourable Lady has explained, we're all witnessing that decline over the last few years. So does my honourable friend agree that by giving local authorities powers to better hold absent property owners to account, to bring back decaying properties back into use? And does she also agree that cooperative models such as local ownership is another solution that will significantly benefit our economy?
Catherine Atkinson.
And I know that my honourable friend is a great friend to her local high street businesses, and the government has made a commitment on the community right to buy, which also, and the co-op makes a strong case for devolved community ownership funds. So I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. And with that, I would like to turn to vacant properties, to the scourge of the empty properties which we need a particular focus on. The Derbyshire Live website estimated in May that over 80 shops in Derby city centre were currently up for sale or to let, an increase of around 60% on 2 years previously when they carried out the same survey of the major shopping streets. Now, in the last few months, we have seen green shoots with around 30 new businesses that have opened in Derby city centre, and I have high hopes for the effect the regeneration we have planned will have. We have some stunning architecture, but unused buildings fall into rack and ruin, and empty units are such a blight on town and city centres that I want to call today for a specific government strategy on vacant shops.
On that point,
Yes.
Jonathan Bash.
And I think you're making an excellent case for our high street. In Hartlepool, derelict commercial properties are a similar problem. Indeed, just in the last few days, the old Odeon building in Hartlepool was the victim of arson and is currently being demolished as I speak. Do we not need to give far greater powers, as has already been mentioned to local authorities, particularly around compulsory purchase, in order to get these buildings out of the hands of private developers who, quite frankly, aren't interested in the pride and community of our high streets that we're arguing for today?
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank my honourable friend for Hartlepool for his intervention, and that is certainly one of the options we must be exploring, in my view. I know that he has been a strong advocate for investment in Hartlepool. Many people will judge how well the economy does, fairly or unfairly, on whether the number of empty shops in their local town or city centre noticeably rises or falls. I will.
Thank you very much. And it's, well, thank my honourable friend for giving away. You've spoken about the negative impact that empty shops have, and I really welcome your calls for a strategy. Does my honourable friend agree that any strategy must take into account the importance of public transport to enable those who wish to make use of our high streets to do so have access to transport that is regular, reliable and affordable?
Thank you. I do agree with my honourable friend for North East Derbyshire. I know that she has 5 towns in her constituency, and I can understand why the need for public transport is important to ensure their success and that they thrive. I think that we need a number of options, and we do need a new relationship with the owners of properties that are empty. They must understand that if they invest in our centre, they have a special public responsibility. That an unavoidable eyesore is not acceptable for any period of time. When there is a vacancy, there should be immediate work to ensure the street scene remains attractive, with advertising displays or local art commissions into the windows of local vacant units. There should be a presumption of meanwhile use or pop-ups, and I commend Carly Foster, Professor of Services Marketing at the University of Derby, for her work on pop-up retail. And there are a number of possible solutions that should be looked at, and I'd like to take some of them, as already been mentioned. Community ownership will play a key role. The government's community right to buy will help local people to acquire valued community spaces if they come up for sale. And we support and financing help for community ownership to ensure that communities are able to use the powers that they will have. The organisation Power to Change suggests a civic high streets accelerator to do that. Another way to get occupancy up would be high street rental auctions. And I understand we only need secondary legislation, and I would be grateful for an update from the Minister on the timing of that, and an assurance that those auctions will include protections for vacant pubs so that they are not lost. Partnership for Better Businesses Limited, who support the business improvement districts, suggest a penalty could be applied to vacant properties similar to that which is available to vacant residential property. And we should also look at the compulsory purchase orders where there are owners or property agencies who completely and entirely fail to engage. But on the other hand, there must be a real celebration and an appreciation of the owners who are doing the right thing and keeping occupation rates high and our city centres looking at their best. So in conclusion, I am so grateful for having been granted this debate and to speak about my pride for our heritage, small businesses and plans for regeneration in Derby, and for that opportunity to be granted to other honourable members here today. I hope the Minister can update us on the government's progress on the 5-point plan to support small businesses on our high streets. I've called today for a specific strategy on vacant shops and for cross-government coordination of efforts to regenerate our town and city centres, so that when it comes to future Remembrance Sundays, we look around not just with absolute pride in the people, but also every aspect of the built environment. City and town centres fit for heroes, Yes, those remembered in the war memorials, but also the everyday heroes, our constituents who are working day in, day out for their families and their communities, and who deserve nothing less.
Can I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate? I have to say it's highly unlikely that we're going to fit everyone in. We've got a long list of speakers. I will impose a time limit if necessary, but could I initially say, could you limit yourselves to 3 minutes? And even then, I fear that people near the bottom of the list probably won't be called. And also, could you keep interventions to a minimum to help that? The question is that this House has considered the regeneration of city and town centres. I call Bradley Thomas.
Because it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd particularly like to thank the honourable member for bringing this debate, because I think regardless of politics, so many of us have seen how town centres have been changing over, frankly, probably a couple of decades, really. And I do think it's pertinent for us, Chair, to acknowledge some of the factors that are and have been contributing to that for so long, largely the rise of the internet being a predominant factor. I often speak to people out and about across my constituency, and they'll talk about what are we going to do about high streets. And I always think there's an onus on ourselves to do a little bit more too. It always struck me that if each household in my constituency spent an extra £5 per week in the local economy, that would actually be around £12 million per year that's staying within our local economy, and our high streets would benefit. But more broadly on these points, Chairman, I agree with a reasonable amount of what's been said, and I too am hugely optimistic for the future of our town centres. They are the most visible barometer of the vitality and vibrancy of the places that we represent. And it's critical that we look at this through two lenses. We've got the national piece, and then we've got the local factors too. Nationally, I think we are in need of business rate reform. The business rate system has not been updated to keep pace with changing retail habits, the business environment that we're seeking to create a new culture of investment that will catalyse our town centres and places. But I won't dwell on the business rate reform piece, because there are a few other points that I particularly want to make. And one of them is what can be encouraged at a local level. So I'm particularly keen to see, Chairman, local councils take a much more active role in championing their towns and communities as destinations for investment. And I don't refer to this through the lens of the planning system, but from a perspective of what's the vision and potential of the place. You know, what are the natural, the cultural, the heritage assets, the quality of the built environment that are the hooks upon which we can attract high quality investment, whether it be from large corporates, institutional investors, or even local entrepreneurs who want to create a sense of vitality in their area whilst creating a living for themselves. And I would call upon the government to encourage and support as many councils as possible in creating local investment prospectuses that will drive really unique investment to capture and catalyse the potential of each of our places. And hanging off that, Chairman, is the role of urban design. For many years before my election to Parliament, I've been speaking about design, and those who know me well will probably be sick of hearing me talk about it, but it's absolutely fundamental. The honourable member who has called this debate, she talked about the quality of the built environment. And we've got to really shift our mindset on this away from good design being seen as a cost, but instead to an investment. It's an investment upon which we get so many returns, tangible, intangible. This is about how we can design out crime, design in health and well-being, really sort of inspire a sense of pride where people don't just want to live, but hanging from that is a catalysed sense of economic renewal. A couple of additional points, Chair, before I wrap up. Skills. Skills is also fundamental. If we get this right, focusing on our town centres and joining the dots on this with the wider economic renewal of our constituencies, and focus on long-term industrial strategy and skills agenda, we can really make a difference. So I'd call upon the government, Chairman, to really focus on how we can empower local councils, focus on long-term industrial strategy for the UK, and in particular the roles that skills development can play in catalysing our areas.
James Frith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to speak under your chairmanship, and I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this important debate. For those of us that have been a bit geeky on towns, it's always nice to stand up and, in the presence of my good friend, the Minister, who I've yet to be in a position to address as the Minister in formal capacity, congratulate him also in the help it bumps me up a few in the line for community ownership funding as we await decisions to be taken. Because the Labour government has got some difficult decisions to take, of course, and I rise to ask first and foremost that bids that were in are not victim of general election, that there is no fancy footwork on that, and that we can be assured of the funding bids that have got in, that have made the cut under a previous administration and now, I hope, receive the funding and the authority. I'm delighted to be back here as the town's Member of Parliament for Bury North, an area that has three towns, Tottington, Ramsbottom and Bury, of course, itself. And, of course, the debate is about cities as well. But I want to remark specifically on the role of towns, but also the role of towns very often in the shadow of some of our greatest English cities, and Manchester being the one nearest to Bury. And the plight of our football club actually speaks to this, that assets, community assets, very often are diminished by policy or decisions taken about us, without us. Towns that feel ignored. Cultural assets, social capital, economic capital, decisions being taken elsewhere that then affect us. And actually what people in Bury want is a degree of self-determination. We have an innovative council that has been doing for now well over 10 years, trying to do as much as it possibly can with a diminishing amount of money, and austerity continues, whether it's the SEN crisis or the investment in our road networks, or whether or not we can afford to cut the weeds and make a place look nice enough to visit. And it is these simple things alongside the bigger fixed items of important funding, of a plan, of bringing the buses back into public ownership, as our friend, the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, has done so effectively. But it's also about taking the analysis that was accurate under the last Conservative government, one of levelling up, and saying, well, they were right with the analysis, but they forgot to do the impact assessment. Yeah. They forgot to do the impact, full stop, because it isn't enough to point at projects that may or may not be funded and pit one authority area, one town, against the other in, as my honourable friend Lisa Nandy has spoken of, this example of a kind of Hunger Games style of funding. Yeah. And so I ask that the Minister give us assurance that both the 3-year pact with local authorities and the funding that we're due to get for our towns will be clear as soon as it is able to be after the budget. But that also we don't, in waiting for the 3-year pact, we don't drop the ball on what is required right now, despite the financial inheritance of the £22 billion black hole, that in fact it's a Labour Party and the Labour government that says we will not let the mess we've inherited determine every single decision we make about towns and cities and the redevelopment, because that self-determination is hugely important. And I want just to give, in closing, a final comment on the assets that we enjoy in Bury, whether that is Broad Street Social. I think I'm allowed to mention my favourite bar, my good friend Jen Smith, who helped prepare for today's remarks, as well as Wax and Beans, a great independent record shop, Bloom, which is a terrific eatery and coffee shop. There's a wine shop called Quaff. You're getting a bit of a sense of where I spend my time. But people crucially need that time off work, whether that's actually through flexible working or a rebalancing of expectations post-COVID with your employer, to get out and spend that hard-earned money in the towns that we all want to see thriving. And so I welcome this chance to debate. There's plenty more still to say. Congratulations to my honourable friend, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
We're slightly over the 3 minutes from the first two speakers, but Rachel Hopkins is now going to demonstrate how to keep to time.
I thank you, Mr Vickers, and it's a pleasure to see you in the chairship with that challenge duly accepted. Yeah. And I'd really like to congratulate my good friend from Derby North for instigating this debate and a brilliant opening speech. We've heard contributions so far talk about our towns and city centres that are at the heart of our local communities. But unfortunately, under the premiership of the previous government, they were overlooked, underfunded and undervalued for too long. And this is manifested in empty retail spaces, boarded up shops and the loss of banks and other local independent businesses in our communities. The British Retail Consortium found that 6,000 shops have been lost in the last 5 years, and in many of these cases, overhead costs such as business rates have had a material impact on the decision to close. So I welcome Labour's plans to tackle this head-on and reform the business rate system, levelling the playing field between the high street and online giants, better incentivising local investment, tackling empty properties and supporting entrepreneurship. And supporting our small businesses in Luton South and South Bedfordshire is a matter of great personal interest to me. Indeed, I've just launched my 4th annual Small Business Awards, where residents can nominate their favourite local business and we can support and promote business owners across the constituency. Small businesses are the backbone of our communities and they deserve to be celebrated. We also cannot underestimate the importance of the role of our local authorities when it comes to regeneration in our towns and cities and the creation of place. The Local Government Association, of which I'm proud to be a Vice President, has emphasised the importance of local councils in leading these projects in partnership with residents and local businesses and other anchor institutions. They are best qualified to identify what their community needs. The LGA has also highlighted the need for councils to have access to one pot of long-term funding alongside resources and flexibility from central government to work with local partners. This will allow councils to invest in local infrastructure and support local growth in a way that recognises the unique challenges and opportunities each place faces. So I'm glad that our Labour government recognises the vital role local authorities play and are committed to ensuring they have the tools they need to effectively develop and implement plans to support their high streets. And we're seeing evidence of this of regeneration in Luton, as there's already significant work underway to stimulate economic growth within the town centre, including the development of the multi-purpose development, the Stage in Bute Street, under the Levelling Up Fund. And it would be remiss of me to highlight the brilliant regeneration going on in Luton and to not mention our fantastic Luton Town Football Club, of course. And I was lucky enough to watch that wonderful match in Wembley in May last year when we gained promotion. And ever the optimist, I hope to see us back there once again in the future. But our Premier League promotion meant people from all over the country came to Luton to see exactly what we're about, a beautifully diverse town with thriving cultural scene and the sense of community. And of course, the redevelopment of the Power Court area, including the relocation of Luton Town Football Club's new stadium, is a defining milestone in this mission. Plans for a larger capacity football stadium as well as retail space, a hotel and a music venue marks a regenerative era for the town, as well as being representative of the increasing ambitions Luton holds for its football team. With exciting regeneration plans underway in Luton, an accessible station and a connected local transportation network have never been more necessary. And I will continue to campaign for access for all lifts at Luton Station and a complete regeneration of it, but that's a debate for another time. So to conclude, I will say I'm very glad that where regeneration and sustainability of our towns and city centres were once an afterthought, they are now a primary focus for our new government as we work to deliver economic growth and raise living standards across the country. Thank you.
Yeah. 4 minutes, so we're getting better. Jim Shannon will only take 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll certainly endeavour to do so. Can I first of all thank the Honourable Lady for Derby North for setting the scene so very well. Thank her for that. That's given us all an opportunity to be here and participate. As always, Mr. Chairman, I give an Northern Ireland perspective, and I give it specifically about one town, but I have 3 towns in my constituency: Newtownards, Cumber and Ballinhinch. The main town in my constituency of Strangford is Newtownards. It's thriving and it's bucking the trend of the high streets across the UK. But I have to say this is down, and the reasons why there is success is because of the independent retailers with small shops who work their own small shops and are part of the local community, from Sheldon Galleries, who produce artwork of local and international renown, to independent clothing boutiques, shoe shops. The town centre has fought hard to remain relevant, and yet it is not immune from empty spaces and old shutters. So what's one of the secrets? The secret is a vibrant chamber of trade. We have that in Newton Ards. We're very pleased to do so. We have one that's in Cumber and also one in Ballynahinch as well. Now, it's clear that that despite the hard work of local chamber of trade, such as Derek Wright and Newton Ards Chamber, they cannot save the high street alone. Their contributions are important, the partnerships are important, but it's not the only thing, so government help has to be part of that as well. Can I just welcome the Minister to this place? It's very pleased to see him. We've done many debates in Westminster Hall together on different subjects, but I do look forward to his response, ever mindful that he isn't responsible. The Minister's not responsible for Northern Ireland, but to set the scene and have some relevance to this debate. They need government investment in the future, knowing it's a circular economy and that those local shopkeepers use that money to buy locally and important to spend locally. So years of trading, some of the shops have been there for 100 years. They have adapted to the times as well. We have family businesses, we have clothing shops, antique shops, coffee. There's a coffee culture in Newton Ards. Again, it brings people to the town centre. Just some ideas perhaps and what we could do. Restaurants and pubs as well. The honourable gentleman who spoke before referred to the pubs, and they're an integral and important part. I'm very conscious of your endeavours at reaching the time. I once read a sign that said, I'm going to paraphrase it because it isn't word for word, but it would be an awfully big sign if it was, your custom isn't paying for a CEO's holiday home. It pays for me and my children to swim in the local pool. It pays local people wages, keeping your money at work within our community. And this really struck me. In the age of online purchasing, the importance of the high street in the economy cannot be overstated. That's why I was incredibly concerned when the news came that the city deals have been paused. We're very pleased in Ards and North Down to have some of the spin-off from the city deal from the Belfast end of it. And we in Ards and North Down will feel some of the goodness that comes from that. The tourist attractions that we have in the area, the Bangor waterfront redevelopment scene, is something which will literally breathe life and revive Bangor. The title of City Deals hides the impact that smaller towns will receive that are vital for survival. Last comment, Mr. Chairman. The High Street is the lifeblood of the local economy, and whilst we rightly encourage our retailers to go online and make the most of a bigger audience, we also need to retain face-to-face customer service and kindness, and this will only come if our government prioritises people and sows into the regeneration of our town centres. There is everything to play for, and we all need to be playing by the same rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a pleasure to speak in this debate, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Derby North, for calling it. Town centres are not merely a collection of shop units in our town centre. They form part of the social fabric of our communities, and they deserve, my community certainly deserves, a government which will proactively regenerate that social fabric. As the MP for Crewe and Nantwich, the place I am proud to call my home, I have witnessed the decline of Crewe town centre. Now, it isn't lost to me that the emergence of online retail has had a part to play in the decline of our town centres. But what we need is a government which stands ready to respond to those changing circumstances, not one which simply expects the market alone to sort it all out. I believe that each town across this country has its own distinct draw, and local authorities need to be empowered by the government to reflect that. In my constituency, we have demonstrated how hospitality, leisure and experience-based initiatives can drive improvement, from the fantastic events like the Nantwich Food Festival to the investment by our Labour-led council in the Crewe Market Hall, transforming the venue into a thriving modern food, drink and entertainment space.
On that point, will he give way?
Yes.
Thank you. Does he agree with me that town centre events have a really important role to play in driving the vitality and viability of town centres that have been in decline? In my own constituency, Northwich Town Council, the Business Improvement District, the Rotary Clubs and various community groups have partnered together to put on a full events programme over the course of the year that really drives footfall into the town centre and has helped us promote it as a destination for businesses considering investing. Would he agree with that?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I absolutely agree with him. where we see local stakeholders and organisations coming together to put on community events that drive footfall into our town centres, that's where we can really tackle that challenge, where we see retail struggling in the modern context. And additionally, at the heart of our local community in Crewe are our vital small businesses, the lifeblood of our communities. They have the community at the heart of their agendas, and they understand what is best for their local areas. Ensuring their success will be our success, and I hope to see the government proactively pursue that agenda as we move forward. And to that end, I welcome this government's commitment to business rate reform, which will have a huge impact in terms of our ability to support small businesses and encourage them back to the high street where they are not currently there. Nonetheless, there are challenges that I know not only my constituency faces, as we have heard from the contributions so far. One such issue, which has been mentioned often, is empty shop units. Local councils need to be given more power to be able to take a more active role in the take-up of these empty units. For example, the disused Marks and Spencer's building in Crewe is a great but sad example of just that, with significant heritage and value that makes it an important asset to our community. But it has damage inside, which makes it a poor attraction commercially, meaning it has stayed unoccupied and of no local benefit. So I would ask the Minister what steps this government is taking to ensure we can breathe new life into buildings such as this one in the heart of our town centres. Furthermore, connectivity remains an issue affecting many northern towns such as Crewe, where our railway heritage is a fantastic asset in terms of regional and national connectivity, but actually presents a challenge because we have things like railway bridges and tracks throughout the town centre which create a challenge in terms of connecting within the town itself. My hope is that this government's planning reforms will give more power to local authorities or prospective private investors into towns across the UK, and this government's commitment to cross-departmental working will be able to support greater connectivity within our town centres. And I finish just by saying that I want this government to put local communities at the heart of decision-making for our town centres. In our manifesto, we talked about returning power to local communities, and I urge the government to make good on this promise.
In order to try and get most people in, I'll now impose a fixed 3-minute time limit, and the next speaker is Darren Paffey.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. And it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship in this, my first Westminster Hall debate, or at least the first one I've managed to get called in. So I'm very grateful. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Derby North, for securing this important debate and for setting out so eloquently the issues. Southampton has been both a town and a city, and since 1964, when it became one, in that time it has grown to not only be a vibrant and diverse urban community, but also an economic hub, a centre of oceanographic innovation, with a world-leading shipping industry and emerging green tech businesses. And so it's a privilege to be able to speak today with optimism about the future of my city and the towns and cities represented by colleagues here, and precisely to have that optimism because of this Labour government. The announcements that the Prime Minister made on Monday after the Investment Summit were a breath of fresh air and hugely welcome. I'm here to speak up for my constituents in Southampton Itchen to ensure that they get a fair slice of that £63 billion pie. Because, as the member for Bury North has quite rightly stated, the last government's levelling up agenda did not exactly do what it said on the tin, and too many towns and cities have been left behind. The Prime Minister's made it clear that this government is committed to revitalising communities, and Southampton Itchen is perfectly positioned to seize these opportunities. So perhaps the Minister could outline the process and the timetable for getting some of that investment out into our cities and towns. We have to make sure that that investment reaches then reaches our town centres and reaches our high streets, that connect our constituents and that provide those jobs and opportunities for them. We also need to ensure that decision-making and place shaping is led by local leadership. Southampton, along with others in the area, are looking at a devolution deal. And again, I would ask the Minister to be sympathetic to the call for national and local leaders to work together for the benefit of all. Any visitor to the city centre of Southampton will come across West Quay, a state-of-the-art shopping centre that draws shoppers from across the region. They'll see the port, a critical hub of trade for the UK. And they'll see the cultural quarter, a centre for learning and arts and diversity, and a mosaic of small businesses. But they will also see stalled development sites. They will see district centres that are too often forgotten. And so while that investment is important, and I finish with this, and it's a welcome departure from the last 14 years, we have to regenerate well with all our commercial spaces and jobs, but also dentists, GP surgeries, schools, and so on, so that people love where they live.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vickers. It's a privilege to serve under your chairpersonship and to welcome my honourable friend Derby North for starting this debate. This is an important debate, as the turnout today shows, from so many of us from all sides of the House concerned about our high streets. Few things are as symbolic of the broken nature of Britain than the decline of our high streets. Empty shops, fewer police officers, drugs, antisocial behaviour. These are just some of the issues businesses and residents raise with me about my own town's city centre in Peterborough. And in Peterborough, we are blessed with a heritage that many would be proud of, a world-class cathedral, a new town and development corporation legacy, an incredible museum and access to the arts and culture, diversity that brings together world culture in one city. But despite this inheritance, it has been a tough decade for all of our high streets and city centres. Despite the promises, we've not seen an increase in police as we were promised. Drugs and antisocial behaviour remain a problem in too many areas. Under the last government, in Peterborough, we lost our John Lewis, our M&S, and suffered incredible cuts to local government, which have made all of our lives harder. And this goes to the heart of what kind of community do people want to live in. And it's not just about city centres. We have broken promises over the long-awaited regeneration of Lincoln Road in Peterborough, and we've seen wear and tear in our new town centres like Bretton and Werrington. That's why regeneration matters so much, because the raw ingredients for Peterborough are there, but they need leadership, action and investment. Peterborough Cathedral's Monsters of the Sea exhibition this year attracted over 30,000 visitors, so we know it can be done. ARU Peterborough, our new university, is bringing new life to the city. A new bid, 2 years in, Peterborough Positive, that is establishing itself as a voice for local businesses and traders. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to Pep Cipriani and Sean Page and the bid team for their work. I'd also like to thank our Labour Mayor, Dr Nick Johnson, Peterborough and Cambridge Combined Authority, Network Rail and the Council for their work on a new station regeneration programme. It's a project that is welcome, but it should have come much sooner. The first phase of regeneration of our city. These next phases after that will show the ambition we have as a government, a council, a mayor and a city, with a new bus station, accessibility at its heart, a new indoor pool to replace the one shut by the previous council. So I urge the Minister to ensure that in the government's plans for our high streets, we make it easier for cities like mine. A clear message to the council, they have a leading role to play in shaping our future. Action to help small businesses, shopkeepers and hospitality by tackling late payments, taking a tougher line against retail crime and reforming business rates. Most of all, we need a plan and vision, backed up by the investment and funding to turn our city around and create the jobs, community and prosperity we need.
My friend, the Honourable Member for Derby North, on securing this debate. I want to focus my remarks on empty shops. And Mr Vickers, you'll be very familiar, as my constituent, about some of the comments that I'm going to make in this debate. This really isn't a new story. You know, the decline of town centres has been overseen by a decade and a half of neglect in terms of a national strategy to ensure that communities continue to have healthy, thriving high streets and town centres. And it's really fallen to local areas to undertake plans themselves at significant cost and time to present plans to government to then gradually eke out funds at sporadic intervals to try and fulfil their local vision. Now, that's happened in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, an endeavour under the banner of the Greater Grimsby Town Deal Board, and that commitment of local businesses has then brought the establishment of the 2025 group, who are working together to deliver the kinds of improvements that will make areas attractive and safe to encourage increased use of expanding town centre facilities. I've long argued, Mr Vickers, that town centres and high streets do need to evolve to survive. That requires intervention where the market fails. So initiatives like the new Horizon Youth Zone on Garth Lane, introduction of a community diagnostic centre that is not without its issues, by the way, but I'm raising it separately with the Health Secretary, a new transport hub that is proposed, will all go to making Grimsby Town Centre in particular much more attractive. And we do have some brilliant businesses in our town centres and high streets. They all worked so hard through the pandemic to keep going in the face of rising bills. They've dug deep and kept their doors open. I went to the Great Big Small Awards recently, and I was pleased to see so many small businesses celebrating and being celebrated for their contributions to the vibrancy of the offer across North East Lincolnshire. I don't have time to mention them all. I really wanted to, but I will say Buzz Cafe got the best chips in the world. If anyone wants to come for Fish and Chip Friday, you're very, very welcome. And I want to talk about empty shops. Grimsby Cleethorpes have got loads of empty shops, whether you're on St Peter's Avenue or the Marketplace, which is just behind, which is planned to be pedestrianised. It's a real worry to local businesses that will affect footfall for them. Companies, banks in particular, they're leaving big gaps. They lie empty for extended periods of time. When they're filled, this is an issue that I've already raised before, they are filled with vape shops, they are filled with barbers, and there is a real lack of a range of different options that come. So I really support the comments that the Honourable Member for Derby North has made about keeping the quality good, appearance less gaudy, the impression of the area high level, so it's improved, so it makes it more, not less attractive. Thank you.
Alaba.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I'd also like to thank Catherine Atkinson for securing this debate. It is one that is incredibly important to me and my constituency in Southend, East and Rochford. When we talk about high streets and city centre regeneration, we are talking about so much more than just about the retail industry alone. The ripple effect is clear. Declining footfall also threatens hospitality, cultural amenities, tourism, employment, and the list is actually endless. One of the reasons why I stood to be the MP in South and East of Rochford is that I can see how much potential the area has to offer. As a coastal community in the commuter belt of London, regenerating the city centre and high streets like Hamlet Court will be key to unlocking a prosperous local economy. I've met with a multitude of local businesses to understand the challenges they have faced and discussed a strategy moving forward to revive our high streets. They have told me about the difficulties in covering business rates, utility bills, and the decreased footfall due to antisocial behaviour, which ironically increases as our shops and venues close down. A byproduct of having a vibrant high street is that it's a gateway for young people, providing soft skills, equipping them for the future. Last week I met with bar operators on Alexandra Street, who I know will be vital to the regeneration of the city centre in Southend. Independent businesses like Indie Rock are reinventing what the high street has to offer and are paving the way for businesses to come. Having had a long career in regeneration and the hospitality industry myself, chatting to these organisations at the forefront of Southend's offer, I felt inspired that there was a collective of new businesses looking to reanimate the town centre. It is now our obligation to support them with strong forward-thinking policy, giving them the foundations to grow their business and to elevate the communities they're within. Another important aspect of a vibrant high street is the circular economy, which is limited in Southend and Rochford due to its struggling high streets. We need to put the mechanisms in place that see every pound spent circulated 3, 4, or even 5 times locally. This is the goal of any community that wants to future-proof its relevance. Economic growth is the defining mission of this government, and ensuring thriving local high streets is central to this. As MPs, we need to work towards effective partnerships with local authorities and business associations to realise this mission locally and to restore vibrancy to our high streets. I'm filled with the hope that visitors to Southend, East and Rochford will step off a train from Southend Victoria or Southend Central and will know from the thriving, bustling and prosperous high street that our local area is well worth a return visit. Thank you.
Melanie Ward. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr Vickers. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I congratulate my honourable friend from Derby North on securing this important debate. After 14 years of Tory government and 17 years of the SNP, and failed governments were both, it is needed more than ever for those of us who represent Scottish constituencies. Kirkcaldy is the biggest town in my constituency, and 2 weeks ago I held a roundtable for business owners and managers on Kirkcaldy High Street to discuss the urgent need to revive our town centre. They expressed their concerns about a high street that is far from what it used to be, with empty shop fronts that do not reflect the ingenuity or industriousness of Kirkcaldy's people. The shopfront vacancy rate on the high street sits at over 25%, and the number of businesses in my constituency declined by 22% and 14% in Cowdenbeath and in Kirkcaldy respectively in the 3 years after the pandemic. Perhaps the most disheartening thing about the vacancy rate is the feeling that when a unit becomes vacant, residents tell me they feel it is unlikely ever to have anyone filling it again, and we have to change that. At my roundtable, attendees expressed a fear of a vicious cycle, which I've heard mentioned by other MPs today. They worry that as the closure of shops leads to lower footfall in cafes, restaurants and pubs, the eventual closure of those establishments is more likely too. And despite the important work of Fife Council, this is what happens with almost 2 decades without a proper national economic development strategy or a proper national industrial strategy. This is the effect on town centres like Kirkcaldy's. I'm grateful, therefore, that this week the Labour government has seen success in the investment summit, and we have a consultation on the new industrial strategy, and we must ensure that that helps towns and cities to thrive as part of a cross-government approach, rather than just fight amongst themselves for scraps of investment. Business rates have also been mentioned by a number of colleagues. They are an issue that is devolved, and we in Scottish Labour have long called for a rebalancing of rates between online and physical retail premises. There's much more to say, of course, but I want finally to mention that I am encouraged in my own constituency by community action in improving our high street, because retail must be part of the solution, but so must other activity too. And I particularly commend the work of Love Our Lang Toon, referencing the epic length of our seafront. And also, I warmly congratulate the Adam Smith Global Foundation on the success of the new Kirkcaldy lottery, which should also help with regeneration of our high street. There is so much to do to ensure regeneration in our high street that helps to give us a future to look forward to and not just a past to be proud of. Thank you.
Sato.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you to my honourable friend for bringing this debate today. We've all heard the challenges facing our high streets. In Lowestoft and Beccles, in my constituency, the difficulties are all too real. Last year, a survey found that out of the 366 premises in Lowestoft, 96 were empty. In Beccles, our last remaining bank for business, Lloyds, is set to close, forcing businesses who rely on it to travel to Lowestoft on gridlocked roads to do their banking. Poor mobile connectivity in Beccles is also hampering our residents' ability to do business effectively. And we lack a real plan to support our Lowestoft nighttime economy, our wonderful theatres, the marina and players, our cinema, the most easterly in the UK, and excellent restaurants like Mark G. We lack buses which run into the evening and later trains from Lowestoft to Ipswich. I'm glad, however, to say that in Lowestoft we have seen the signs of life returning to the high street. Our heritage action zones have breathed new life into beautiful old buildings. Plans like the £24.3 million cultural quarter and the £4.8 million creative hub in a former post office are incredibly exciting. These investments are not just about buildings, they represent a belief in the future of our town. We are reimagining our future as a green energy gateway to the east of England and as a cultural destination, led by the excellent team behind the First Light Festival.
Meeting with businesses in the town, I see that belief, and I am confident that Lowestoft has what it takes to bounce back fully. I myself made a pledge in the election to open a parliamentary office on the High Street should I win, and I'm delighted that soon I will do just that. Lowestoft is a beautiful place with potential that's beginning to be unlocked by entrepreneurs, community leaders and the fantastic people behind Lowestoft Vision. And the momentum we're gaining needs to be sustained. That's why this government's plans to boost business and build back the high street are so important, whether that's tackling antisocial behaviour or giving communities the power to revamp their high streets. I hope the Minister can reassure us that the Government is working at speed to review business rates in order to ensure that our small high street businesses aren't at a disadvantage compared to the big online giants. I'm confident that there is a way forward so that our high streets are once again not just surviving but thriving. Thank you.
We've got 3 more speakers, and if they take 2 minutes each, although there's only 2 standing now, 2 minutes each. Amanda Martin.
Thank you for your chairmanship, and thank you for the honourable member from Derby North, nearly said my own, for bringing this debate and raising compulsory purchase order and auctions, areas I know will be welcome in my city. Portsmouth is a proud city of heritage, the Royal Navy and development, but so much of that is in the south. In my constituency of Portsmouth North, there are forgotten high streets, Cosham, North End and the London Road, which runs through the centre, none of which have received high street funding, are in desperate need of regeneration. My constituencies are writing to me, complaining of high streets proliferated by bookies, vape shops and massage parlours and pubs being boarded up, rather than quality businesses and family-friendly spaces. But what do we need to do? We need solutions. We need a holistic, creative approach to placemaking regeneration that includes the voices of community, developing public realm into useful and beautiful spaces. We should not shy away from expecting where we live to benefit the lives and well-being. And we need to build capacity up in local authority planning is crucial. Where there is excessive retail properties or office space leading to vacant shops, we need to it creates a feeling of decline. Where cross-government cooperation and support for local authorities, we could repurpose those buildings, providing the new primary...
The sitting is suspended for 15 minutes. We will resume with Tim Rocker.
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank my honourable friend for Derby North for calling this debate. It's incredibly important, and she's already proving herself a powerful advocate for her constituents. One of the issues that we're contending with, of course, is the inheritance from the last government. In this area, like so many others, it's clear that they were a dismal failure. Over 14 long years, sometimes supported by our Liberal Democrat colleagues, 420,000 traditional retail jobs were lost, 10,000 retail stores closed their doors, and Macclesfield itself has been no stranger to this. Residents know of the long depressing decline of Mac Town Centre, empty shops along Mill Street, my own campaign office having to move because under the parliamentary budget we couldn't afford the rent and the business rates. And there's also a huge empty building where Marks and Spencer's was, because out-of-town retail parks, passed over the heads of local councils, against the wishes of local councillors, are damaging the vitality of our town centres. Now, we do have phenomenal businesses in Macclesfield. We have the treacle market, which is famous in the region, and there's rightly a debate as to whether a bid would be right for our town. But, Chair, if we're to be serious in this place about supporting our town centres, we need to reform business rates. We need greater devolution in Cheshire. We need to back Great British Energy to reduce energy costs for business. We need to deal with the issue of empty shops. I like the idea of the strategy that the Honourable Member for Derby North mentioned. We want to see housing opportunities in our town centres exploited, so we've got the right mix in our town centres. We need to improve connectivity. In Macclesfield, we've seen a huge decline in bus links to our outlying villages that we need to restore. So I'm glad to see that the government is moving on these issues. I will be backing local businesses in my constituency by using them, and down here I'll be advocating for the tax, devolution and investment changes they need to help revive our high streets and town centres.
Slade.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Mr Vickers, and to represent the Liberal Democrats for the first time as a housing, communities and local government spokesperson. The regeneration of towns and cities is an intensely local matter, and it must be approached from a local perspective. Telling people what will fix their towns is the best way to fail. Cities and towns evolved over many, many decades, and the vestiges of every generation serve as a reminder of what once was. And local authorities need to balance the needs to retain the heritage of place with an eye to the future. Toxic nostalgia about how places were when we were young can be a really dangerous inhibitor to regeneration. When we were young is subjective. And I'll give you two examples. The department stores that sorted out our parents' wedding lists and immortalised by Mrs Slocum and Captain Peacock belied the slum conditions and the heavy pollutions in the cities right outside those stores. And the high streets of my childhood, with their Woolworths and Blockbuster videos, are remembered much more fondly than the massive dole queues that were on the very same high streets. And we forget how the infamous pick and mix counter destroyed so many independent sweet shops. City centres have always changed over time, and if we want to avoid another decade of decline after the shocks of Brexit and COVID, we need the government to invest and hand the resources and responsibilities to councils and communities. And we need to make sure, as previously referenced, that our towns and cities give visitors an experience. Shopping will still be part of that, but rarely is somebody going to the city for just shopping. It's now for eating, playing, meeting, working, living. And we need to make sure that high streets aren't about retail anymore. Government needs to help businesses become more efficient and make them use of technology, but also provide people with the skills to adapt to their second or third careers through better use of the apprenticeship levy and supporting both FE colleges and specialist skills providers offering more bespoke and more agile courses, particularly for people for whom traditional education has failed, like Mike Taylor Education in my constituency, offering high-quality barbering courses from a high street location and supporting other thriving businesses with their future workforce. Liberal Democrats want to see the various pots of money like Future High Street and Towns Fund rolled into a single pot, like with the Shared Prosperity Fund, and make sure that we do not have the cliff edge that we're expecting in March 25, so that at least for another year, councils know where they stand, while a longer-term funding cycle is developed. We must learn lessons from the past. Under a previous Conservative administration, Bournemouth Council approved an out-of-town shopping centre, which led to a mass exodus of most of the corporates from the centre of the town. Of course.
Lady agree that we need some focused solutions. You've talked around holistic, you've talked about the changing in our high streets and how we need it for communities, whether that be for new GP surgeries, whether for nurseries, whether they're private or local authority, whether that be pop-up markets that we've heard about, or whether that be art studios, or actually facilities that we need, like baby changing and public toilets. And in order to do that, we will need, does the Honourable Lady agree that we need to reform business rates? We need to make sure that our planning departments in our local authorities have capacity to look at those changes. And does the Honourable Lady agree that we need cross-government working, whether that's Home Office to make our streets safe, whether that's the HCLG supporting local authorities, updating planning systems? Thank you.
Trying to repeat the 30 seconds you lost.
The
intervention should be much shorter.
Does she agree there needs cross-government working? Thank you.
I will come on to business rates later on, and I absolutely agree. Meanwhile use is such an important thing that we can all be using. So turning to this out-of-town shopping centre, the reasons that it was such a catastrophe is that it created a cost-effective way for major retailers to go there without the need to navigate town centre traffic, without the need to maintain historic or awkward buildings, referring to your Marks and Spencers earlier with its difficulties, and where they could give customers and staff free parking. We're seeing similar mistakes now in my own constituency of Mid Dorset and North Poole, with low-cost supermarkets buying up seemingly easy plots on the edge of town, forcing everyone into their cars to make a visit, rather than invest in underused or empty, awkward town centre units, which central government might be able to give investment to, driving people into town. The other things that we need to do... Of course.
I was the leader of Bassett Law District Council, which was the home of Wilco's in Bassett Law, which of course went under two summers ago. When Wilco went under, only a month or so later, the government announced 55 towns were going to get £20 million to create shiny projects. Do you agree with me that we should be thinking differently about certain retail units that actually play a social function as well as an economic function in our town centres?
Vicky Slade.
Delighted that Poole was one of the places to get its Wilco back a little while ago, and that was a great celebration. But you're absolutely right. Some of these town centre units are anchor spaces, and planning and financial levers, like allowing councils to keep their locally generated business rates, could transform them by allowing them to work with businesses. Because currently it means councils having to backfill those lost business rates sent to the Treasury, with council taxpayers funding that, making it a very difficult ask for them. Now, business rates, as many people have said, must be an urgent priority for this government, and I'm confident from the nodding I've seen that that is going to be happening. And in fact, it's what first got me interested in politics, having felt the unfairness of business rates when I had my own high street business. Liberal Democrats want to see them replaced with a commercial landowner levy alongside an increase in the digital services tax, which would boost investment and cut taxes for business in 9 out of 10 English local authorities and benefit retailers and other small businesses, but also reduce the burden on councils through fewer land parcels to be taxed. Turning to planning, there is deep concern, not just from the Liberal Democrats, but from the LGA, who represent the whole local government family, about the unfettered use of permitted development. Converted offices often provide poor living spaces, and using permitted development means affordable housing and community infrastructure is not provided, adding more burden to local people and services and impacting negatively on community cohesion. City and town centres need the same careful plan-led development as suburban and rural areas, with community consent at the very heart of regeneration. This way, I'm sure that many of the 1.5 million new homes planned by the government can be delivered. But it will only work alongside high-quality design and a substantial injection of grant funding. Housing development in urban areas is complex and expensive, and organisations like Homes England and other funding will be needed to provide that support. Cranes in the sky is the best energiser to the local development market, and sometimes it's councils that must blink first. Schemes like Holes Bay and Poole need urgent support to make sure we don't miss the opportunity to thrive right here with a brand new government. And finally, towns and cities need people to come in. So transport needs urgent reform. We need to welcome the potential for councils to franchise bus services if it's right for them. But it's not just buses. The national grid needs boosting so EV can be turbocharged, and we need a reduction in VAT to 5% on public charging so everyone has the right to drive EV. On a day-to-day basis, we really need the legislation on the use of e-scooters, improving our pavements, dealing with the issues relating to delivery mopeds that are making people's lives an absolute misery, as well as dealing with congestion on our streets. A vibrant town centre needs arts and culture reflecting our diverse populations, and events like Wimborne Folk Festival and Wareham Wednesdays draw people in from surrounding towns and villages. And bigger ones like Arts by the Sea in Bournemouth and Poole Oktoberfest not only draw people in on the shoulder areas around the seaside time, but also, agreeing with the intervention made earlier, they create the opportunity for investors to see our towns at their best. We need to make sure that councils can afford to support tourism. And with the squeeze on councils over the last decade under the Conservatives, it's made it virtually impossible for councils to fund these non-statutory things. So I would like the government to keep considering options such as tourism levies and LVEPs and other ways for local councils to generate income. Lib Dems are calling on the new Labour government to properly fund local government, urgently close the £4 billion local government funding gap and let councils lead change. As a former council leader, I've witnessed how councils have had to reinvent themselves time and again, and they touch every home and every business, so investing locally will pay dividends. We know what works, but just as importantly, councils know what doesn't work. Just like the big industries that shaped our cities for the first half of the 20th century that aren't coming back, the giant retailers that shaped our town centres in the second half are part of history too. So to create thriving communities, we need the government to invest local and let places choose how they regenerate. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Shadow Minister David Simmons.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Vickers. It's been a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm sure it will continue to be a pleasure to serve under the chairmanship of Sir Roger. Mr Chairman, it's been a very wide-ranging debate today that has gone from the commanding heights of the international economy to the truly micro. And I commend the member for Derby North for having brought together a wide group of members with a clear interest in both the role of local authorities, in regeneration specifically, but more broadly in the future success of our high streets. It is always worth remembering that when there are international investment summits, 70% of people in work in the UK are in an enterprise with less than 5 staff. So it is easy for those big businesses to turn up and meet government. I have to say I very much welcome the investments that were announced at that investment summit. I welcomed them when they were announced under the previous government, and I welcome them again. But we need to make sure that those investments continue to manifest as a benefit on our high street. I appreciate, as an important starting point, the pressure of time maybe meant the member for Derby North didn't have the opportunity to talk about the input of people like Councillor Barry Lewis, the leader of Derbyshire County Council, and indeed Councillor Ben Bradley, the leader of Nottinghamshire, who are examples of local leaders who have championed inward investment. And of course there are many from across the political spectrum. And here in Parliament is an opportunity for us to reflect that whilst it is easy to describe the problem, we need to focus on what it is we can do that makes a difference. And the member for Bromsgrove shared from his experience as a council leader some examples of that. But in particular, I'm hoping that the Minister, when he responds, will have something to say about the impact of business rate reliefs. Currently, for any English business, that is a shop, a restaurant, a cafe, a bar, pub, cinema, music venue, gym, spa, hotel, or any form of leisure venue, there is a 75% discount on business rates, capped at £110,000 per business per year. I'm aware that that rate relief is not available to the same extent in Labour-run Wales, and I'm aware that the government is about to embark on some budget decisions. But it's clear that the ability of businesses, like those which are anchors on our high streets, to secure that relief has been extremely important, especially in the post-COVID era, in making sure that our high streets remain vibrant. And that sits alongside measures such as... Of course.
I'm very grateful indeed.
as we've heard today, towns and city centres like mine in Maidstone desperately need a range of vibrant and very varied shops and businesses. And does he agree with me that a reduction, not just a reform or another look, but a reduction in business rates would not only incentivise businesses to set up, but especially independents and new startups too, but at the same time ensure that a level playing field starts to be set with e-commerce and home delivery services?
Simmons.
Roger, the member represents the county town of Kent, and I know presses the case which Councillor Roger Gough, as leader of Kent County Council, makes, that as the county town, this is particularly important that it demonstrates a vibrant and thriving high street, and she is a vocal champion for exactly that purpose. So, Roger, I was about to move on to the contribution that measures introduced previously, such as business improvement districts and local enterprise partnerships, have brought. And these have enabled combinations of local employers, business investors, local authorities, landholders, housing providers to come together with a view to looking at how regeneration schemes can best be designed. And I think it is something where there is a very high degree of cross-party consensus, that it is local leaders who know their communities best and are on the whole best placed to design those projects in a way that will bring about the maximum possible benefit. And I acknowledge that the process that we've seen in the Levelling Up Bill and the various different schemes that follow from that have been a challenge sometimes to implement. For many years, the EU cohesion funds were the key source of inward investment at a strategic level. And of course, in the post-COVID era and the post-Brexit era, central government has found it challenging to design a multi-year financial arrangement that replicates those EU cohesion funds, that serves a similar purpose, and that is deliverable at scale. And I wish the new government well with that challenge. And measures taken within that to address some of the particular concerns include the reforms to planning to enable long empty shop units to be converted to provide much needed housing on our high streets, which is also reflected the longer term change in our high street economies from retail to often nighttime economies, leisure and hospitality. Those very businesses which benefit from the biggest level of business rate relief, but which also are becoming mainstays on our high streets. And on the micro, Sir Roger, I think it is also worth touching on a point a number of members have raised, and that is the benefit that having approaches like Safer by Design can bring, using the expertise that planners have to design buildings and developments that from the very start build out antisocial behaviour and crime by virtue of the way that they are laid out and by virtue of the nature of the physical security measures that they benefit from. So moving to a conclusion, Sir Roger, I think it's important to reflect on what other nations have done when it comes to successful regeneration. And the topic today is very much focused around towns and cities. But when German reunification took place, their national politicians were clear from the start that that was going to be a 30-year project to rebalance the country, that it would start with significant investment in large cities to create employment and prosperity, and that that would then feed in to the wider social and public infrastructure around those towns and cities to ensure that in due course everybody in the country could benefit from a higher standard of living. Now it is clear that whilst we set out an ambition on that scale with Levelling Up projects, we didn't have anything like the time and frankly the resource to deliver it to the scale that we wanted to, especially with the relentless calls for higher spending on COVID in the background, which were a key part of shaping the government's financial approach at that time. But I do reflect with a degree of pride that there were on average 400 new jobs created for every single day that the last government was in office over a 14-year period, that the level of youth unemployment, and we must remember that it is unemployment, it is work that is key to regenerating our high streets. If people have money in their pockets, then they will spend it locally. That youth unemployment was half when we left office what it was when we entered. And that many of these projects, particularly think, I was reading earlier on, for example, the Crewe Business Investment District prospectus, started out with the very specific words that this is a private sector-led project, a recognition, as I think we're seeing from the new government as well, that private sector investment is going to be crucial. So my two asks of the Minister as I conclude are, firstly, will he be able to set out, and if not now, give us an indication of when, the timetable for the next round of devolution. We know there are local authorities looking for an elected mayoral model. The East Midlands Combined Authority is one which will be significant for places like Derbyshire, but there are many other parts of England in particular that are looking to that. And can the Minister give us an indication? Will he commit to, or give us a deadline for, a statement on the retention of the 75% business rate reliefs introduced by the previous government, and therefore still followed by the Treasury, but which have been so critical for keeping investment buoyant and employment buoyant on our high streets? But we need to make sure that that absolutely vital lifeline is retained into the future. Sir Roger.
Minister. Alex Norris.
Sir Roger, it's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair and to speak for the government in this debate today. And I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Derby North, in securing it. She can tell, I think, by both the attendance but the enthusiasm of our colleagues that she's clearly struck a nerve here, and I congratulate her in there. And I support so much in what she said, but particularly her passion for the regeneration of our towns and cities to create safe, flourishing local communities. And as Sir Roger, as a Member of Parliament representing a Nottingham constituency, I'm going to endeavour to do the rest of the debate without making a Derby joke, which, given our very important local rivalries, will be very difficult. So if you see me starting to dance on the spot, that will be the reason why. But the points she made, particularly around pride, but also around safety and vacancy, are crucial at the nub of this debate. And I will cover them in my remarks, as well as a number of contributions from other colleagues. But I wanted to start with the point because it's come from both the opposition minister, both the Lib Dem spokesperson, but also a lot of my colleagues and a lot of colleagues generally around the chamber around how important localism is in this space. An intensely local debate, I think, was the Honourable Lady's characterisation. My honourable friend, the member for Luton South and South Bedfordshire, talked about giving communities the tools. My honourable friend for Bury North, who I know is participating in the debate that is in the main chamber now, talked about the local people being the real experts, and I totally agree with that. And we've made a very clear commitment in our manifesto to work closely in a new partnership approach with local authorities, with elected mayors, to stabilise the funding system and to build a new one. And the honourable gentleman rightly talks about efforts that were made under the previous government, and I think of the Future High Streets funds, town deals, the Levelling Up Fund, Community Ownership Fund, UK Shared Prosperity Fund, Long-Term Plan for Towns. Lots of different interventions. I think my analysis would be, and he's heard me say this before, that perhaps they are less than the sum of their parts, and it is our job as a new government, I think, to make good on the commitment that we've made around a more, I will shortly give way, but a more allocative model, perhaps on a longer term basis with less central direction, more local decision making. I'll give way to my friend from Derby South.
Thank you for giving way. Despite successive challenges from devastating local government cuts, the impact of lockdowns during the COVID pandemic, 14 years of underinvestment from the last government, we're fighting back in Derby. We've turned a corner, and I'd say we're actually on the up. We now have a Labour government, we've got a Labour East Midlands mayor who is key to this solution, we've got a Labour council, and importantly, we've got a really strong private-public sector partnership trying to deliver a cleaner, safer and more prosperous Derby. But there is lots more to do. Does my honourable friend agree with me that there is so much more scope in regenerating our city centres with a forward-thinking, collaborative government who works with the private sector but puts working people at the forefront?
The Minister has a very limited amount of time to wind up. I appreciate that there will be honourable members who've not said everything that they want to say. Can I ask you now to resist the temptation of doing so if the Minister is to respond to the debate? Minister.
Thank you, Sir Roger. I'm grateful for that intervention, and I praise my honourable friend's work as when he was leader of the council. And I think, and this is politics blind in that regard, what we want to see is a real alignment from national government to regional or sub-regional government with the local authority and the local community, all working together in that shared interest and using tools and resources to the best way. And that speaks, I think, to the new model that I talked about as invited to by my honourable friend and member for Southampton, Itchin. And we want to bring together across government another theme that came up from the honourable member for Portsmouth North to get the best of it. My honourable friend, the member for Crewe, I am conscious that my biggest personal and professional embarrassment in my life took place in Crewe Town Centre 16 and a half years ago and is a matter of public record. But nevertheless, I know Crewe to be a very vibrant town centre, and his point about local events, I think, was very well made. And the member for Bromsgrove, in terms of investment portfolios, I think that's exactly right. And, you know, to understand that there should be, as the Shadow Minister says, a global reach even to the most local communities, and that's the environment we need to create. And my honourable friend, the member for Strangford, I've had a chance to talk to some of the business owners from Newton Ards when I presented at the High Street Heroes Awards for Retail NI, who do excellent work in this space. And I'm afraid Ballymena won on that day, but nevertheless, I know the creativity. So the key is, and this is different, as he says, in a devolved sense, the key is to get the tools and the resources to the experts, which are the local community. It is no secret that growth is the centre of our mission, and local growth and in towns and city centres, our businesses and our communities that make our high street successful. That is at the core of the activity of a new government. There is no one vision for it. Sir Roger, it will look different everywhere. That's a good thing. But there are common themes around safety, around accessibility, around the types of mix of businesses and services we want to see that I think are probably common. And I'm going to just refer very briefly to a couple of pieces of that, but also to some of the work that has gone so far. We committed prior to the election on our 5-point plan around antisocial behaviour and shoplifting, banking hubs, late payments, revamping empty shops, pubs and community spaces, as well as business rates. And we're underway in that work. And colleagues from Derby North, Grimsby and Cleethorpes and Portsmouth North have mentioned vacancy. Well, we will be bringing in very soon indeed, because as the Honourable Lady says, we only need secondary legislation now. We will be making good on high street rental auctions shortly to give local communities, through their councils, the power to bring vacant units back into use. I, for one, am really looking forward to that. We've then committed, as part of the English devolution bill process, to go further with a right to buy, the community right to buy that I know that there's a lot of interest in, and that again is in train and on its way. Those are real tools to give to communities to help them shape place. Safety has been a theme that's come up frequently. My honourable friend and member for Peterborough, South End East and Rochford have mentioned this. And this is something that, you know, violence in retail space is something that's a very personal passion of mine. And we know that this type of crime and violence in communities is a doom loop, because it creates more vacancy, it creates people less likely to come out, which in turn makes an environment where that thrives. So again, we've committed to a neighbourhood policing guarantee that will return patrols to town centres, 13,000 more police and police community support officers, a named officer in every community for people to turn to, all part of our Safer Streets mission. And we want communities to have their say in how they're used, and most of all to know who to talk to be very clear that there are going to be tools there to tackle those who persistently harm their local community, new respect orders that can have growing penalties, a specific offence of violence against retail workers as well, measures that will make our communities safer to live, work and to visit. I'm very conscious that I'm very near the end of the time, which I think is 14 minutes. Am I right in thinking that, Sir Roger?
The finish time now, because of injury time on the division, is 4:18.
Oh, right. Okay.
But the member in charge,
yes,
in charge, obviously would like a couple of minutes to wind up.
Well, I might move my 1.5 speed down to 1.4 speed there. Then, a number of colleagues, but particularly the colleagues from Macclesfield, Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy, as well as the Shadow Minister, mentioned business rates. And we are very, very mindful of this. We intend, as we've said, to level the playing field between the high street and online giants, to incentivise investment, to tackle empty properties and to support entrepreneurs in that venture. And we know, though, that that has to be a revenue-neutral measure because of the important work that business rates does. I think colleagues and the honourable gentleman, the Shadow Minister, invites me to make a slightly more fulsome commitment than I can today, because we are, 2 weeks away from a major fiscal event, so any significant tax announcement, as you would expect, would take place by the Chancellor at that time. So I have to hold a little bit back there. But we've made the commitment that we've made. And I've said what I've said today, and we understand very clearly just how important that it is. Colleagues, including my honourable friend for Lowestoft, talks about the loss of the final bank in Beccles. And just what a totemic moment that is for a high street or a town, but what a real difference that is in impact on footfall, which is at the heart of the viability of businesses as well as the safety as well. We are very, very keen on and committed to banking hubs. We've committed to rolling out 350 by the end of the Parliament. I think by Christmas the expectation there will already be 100 in place, and I have no doubt that she will be an advocate for her community in that regard. They could be a really important thing in arresting one of the major sources of decline that we've seen over the years, but also something that becomes very attractive to help bring other businesses in and an anchor on a high street. So there's a lot to go for in the banking hubs space. And we want to, colleagues have mentioned a little bit about planning, and we haven't quite got time for the whole planning system itself, but we want to have an environment that promotes that new mix, because we know the Lib Dem spokesperson talks about not wanting to go back to the past. It won't be, because we could order a book in 2 clicks on our phone in this debate, heaven forfend. Instead, we know the future will look differently. So whether it's banking hubs, whether it's a mix of retail and leisure, whether it's, as the Honourable Gentleman says, in the right conditions, housing as well, it's that new mix. And again, we want to make sure that communities have those tools and resources to shape their place to ensure that they can have that. So I'm going to draw my remarks, Sir Roger, to an end so that my honourable friend has time to sum up. But I will end where I started by congratulating her for introducing it. And I know we've heard from across the nations and regions of the UK today, and many common challenges, but a real enthusiasm for the powers and the resources to shape place locally. And that's what this government will deliver on. Thank you.
Catherine Atkinson to wind up the debate.
Joe. I thank the Minister. I know this is an issue that he cares deeply about, and the Shadow Ministers, and the insight and passion that we have heard from honourable members. I was so proud to see so many of my honourable friends elected to serve some of the most beautiful towns and cities in this country, and to hear now about the work they are doing to regenerate them and their huge optimism for the future has been a great pleasure. I will look to find further opportunities to make sure that we can continue this important debate. But, Chair, I don't wish to cause any shock, but statistics tell us that 1/4 of people have already started buying their Christmas presents. Can I implore everyone to do that shopping in our towns and our cities? There is a place for the App Store, but when it comes to Christmas, the real store beats it every time. And I thank you all again for coming and contributing so meaningfully in this debate.
The question is that this House has considered the regeneration of city and town centres. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Order, order. Next debate is due to start at 4:18. We don't have a minister.
The old minister could sit there and